The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad's flashy red and silver war bonnet paint scheme that was used on their passenger trains is one of the most widely recognized liveries ever created for rail equipment. It's always exciting to see some of these locomotives still running around the BNSF Railway system. As the years have gone by, fewer and fewer locomotives survive in regular freight service still wearing this iconic paint scheme. By far, the largest group of these locomotives that can still be seen on occasion are the 700 Series -9 locomotives that were delivered beginning in the summer of 1997. This was an add-on order of locomotives to Santa Fe's 600 Series -9s, although deliveries did not commence until well after the BNSF merger. As a result, these locomotives were delivered in the red and silver paint scheme but with BNSF lettering on the sides rather than Santa Fe. On Sunday, July 13, 2025, two of these locomotives ended up leading a northbound mixed goods train on the Bellingham subdivision to Vancouver, British Columbia. A few of these locomotives usually lead trains a couple times each year in Northwest Washington State, but two leading the same train is quite uncommon. So, I gathered my gear and headed as far south as I could to catch the train. I ended up at a quiet rural crossing a few miles south of Mount Vernon, Washington. With no immediate evidence that the train was nearby, I began setting up my equipment. The freight was closer than I figured, and within 10 minutes, I could see the headlight of the approaching northbound train. BNSF 792 and 719 were leading the way, gleaming in their bright red and silver paint. The two -9 locomotives were followed by a standard BNSF ES44 Evolution Series locomotive in the company's current paint scheme. Despite never being owned by the Santa Fe, the nose of the 719 was, in fact, lettered with Santa Fe rather than BNSF. While most of the 700 series locomotives received BNSF lettering across the nose, several of the earlier locomotives in this batch were given Santa Fe lettering on the front and BNSF lettering on the sides. As soon as the train had passed, I continued up the road to catch it at another spot. I settled on the crossing at the north end of Bowes Siding. Next, I headed north of Bellingham to try to catch the train as it climbed the grade out of town. As I approached the country lane crossing, I noticed a high-rail inspection truck moving slowly along the line. By this time, it was well after 5 p.m., and it was unlikely that the freight train would be sent north to Ferndale before southbound Amtrak train 519 came through. So, I decided to set up for the Amtrak train. I chose the big curve in Ferndale to see the train passing the Ferndale grain elevator. This elevator was shut down in late 2024, and the week after I captured this scene, crews began dismantling the structure. With train 519 through, I returned to the curve at the Country Lane crossing. I was caught by surprise by another southbound train in the form of a BNSF mixed goods manifest. Knowing that it would be a good 40 minutes after this southbound train passed before the northbound came through, it was looking like the northbound train would be covered by shadow from nearby trees at this location. I instead opted to head a few miles north to Tennant Lake off of Hovander Road. A few minutes before 8 p.m., the train finally came through. The mixed freight continued up to Swift to wait for northbound Amtrak Cascades train 519 to overtake it, finally crossing into Canada around 9:30 in the evening. The next day, I kept an eye out on a webcam in White Rock, British Columbia to see if the two locomotives had returned south. Typically, BNSF takes about a day to send locomotives back on a southbound train after they arrive into Vancouver. Not seeing anything earlier in the day, I made my way up to Blaine that afternoon in case the train passed into the US just before dark. After about an hour of waiting, I caught a northbound freight headed into Canada. While this was not the train I was waiting for, it did have a Canadian National SD75 as the second locomotive, which was a neat surprise. It was looking like the train I wanted to see would not show up before dark, so I called it a day and went home. The train finally passed through Bellingham just before midnight. Locomotive 719 was now also facing forward, and a general purpose series locomotive had joined the train for the southbound trip. Once the train returned to Everett, the 792 and 719 were taken off and placed onto the Everett to Roosevelt, Washington garbage train for one round trip. Upon their return to Everett, they were once again placed onto a mixed freight train heading up the Bellingham subdivision to Canada. This northbound trip, however, was made entirely under the cover of darkness. The following day, on July 18th, I made my way back up to Blaine again to see if they would come back south before dark. To my surprise, a southbound did show up, however, it was not the train I was waiting for. But it did have a different BNSF Red and Silver -9, number 711. the train made its way along the shore through White Rock and came to a stop at the border. It sat for about 40 minutes before finally continuing south just as the sun was setting. The red and silver duo eventually did return south, coming across the border around 10 p.m. After returning to Everett, the two locomotives were finally split up, with one heading east toward Pasco, Washington, and the other remaining behind in Everett. Despite not seeing the two locomotives again, it was still a great few days of watching trains on the Bellingham subdivision. I hope you enjoyed coming along on this trip with me. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this video, please post them below in the comments section. As always, a special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. If you would like notifications whenever I post to YouTube, click on the subscribe button and select the Receive All Notifications option. I'll be back next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time for a brand new railroading adventure right here on the YouTube channel. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Mike Armstrong. I'll see you down the line. Thanks for watching.